welcome. My name is Brian, and I'm from Global Hospitality, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about the hospitality industry and how it's affected by COVID and what the industry is to come out of it. So here we go. Bear with me for 1 second. Let me get my slides up. So first of all, it was hard hit. The hospitality industry was probably hit harder than any other industry or any other segment. Out of all of the unemployment, and this goes back to April, and May was a similar situation. 57% of all jobs lost were out of the hospitality industry and leisure. 7.7 million jobs at that. Of that, restaurants were particularly hard hit. 5 million jobs just in food service. When you look at that compared to amusement, which is about 1 million, and hotel accommodations and sports and performing arts were also pretty hard hit. With related businesses, when you add in all of the businesses related to the hospitality industry, it was over 10 million jobs that were lost, mostly in real estate, manufacturing, finance and industry, as well as in retail. So this was an incredibly hard hit segment and stream of employment, just to get the gravity of all of this. So I'm going to start by talking about private clubs. And by nature, private clubs are run by the members, who are also the owners. They're not for profit, and they generally have no rental and no real estate costs. What's great about them is you're a person and you really truly matter to the organization. And that was really felt during the COVID-19. We'll touch on it in a little bit, but after speaking to a lot of my candidates that are in the private club business, I heard lots of stories of actual members reaching into their own pockets to fund a payroll, and we'll see how that hit. The club model compared to a hotel model is very different. In a hotel model, you've got owners, you've got a brand like a Marriott, Hilton, and then a lot of times you've got a third-party management like Interstate or Ambridge, and there's dozens of them out there. So that's a traditional hotel model where you've got 2 to 3 different major power players that are involved in it. In a club model, it's very different. You've got the owners are the members. The brand is also controlled by the members, and it's managed by the management who are employed by the members. So it's really a very different type of a model when you look at the club model versus a hotel model. Some of the big impact areas during COVID was the economics, the staff, being an external home and an additional collateral. This is the big difference between a private club and how private clubs were hit and public hotels. Is a hotel is really not considered an extension of the home. When you are a member of a club, you buy into that club emotionally as well as financially. And because of that, going to the dining room or going to a restaurant in your private club, you may as well be just going to another room in your house because you've got that connection and that buy-in. Where in a hotel, you don't. It's a different choice and a different choice proposition you're making when you decide to go into a hotel or into a restaurant than going into a private club, and you don't necessarily have what I call that emotional collateral going into it. So what are clubs doing, and more importantly, what did clubs do during the pandemic? Through food and beverage, they offered, obviously like everybody else, takeout, curbside delivery, but they did it to a different degree because of that familiarity and that emotional collateral. They did a lot of groceries and that you get. They did a lot of clubs were doing third-party billing, where you could go to a restaurant that partnered with a private club, and you could bill through your private club. On the recreation side, a lot of virtual programming. Golf and mooring usually stayed pretty much afloat. Sorry for that horrible pun with the mooring. Pretty much online, depending on the jurisdiction. But golf seemed to be, there was a lot of restrictions placed on it, but golf seemed to fare pretty well. And now it's back in again, a horrible pun, but back in full swing. There's recreation, everything from yoga to ceramics to workout to Zumba to you name it. It was virtual. But one of the really neat things about private clubs, opposed to a lot of other hotel, is the virtual member hangout, happy hours, book club, live music. Everything was live streamed. Everything was done virtually, which was something really kind of cool. Kept that connectivity. When I spent many years as a private club manager, and one of the things that really prevails in private clubs is this idea of connectivity, and that doing social events kept that connectivity going, which was something fantastic. Communications, but on an Uber level of communications, both from the general manager, from the board of governors, from the executives, daily membership lasts. It was something in again, Uber communication in a way that or public hotels just didn't have to do, and therefore most of them didn't do. I talked to club GMs. They were communicating with staff to 2-3 times a day, which was something really great and kept everybody engaged in their club. On the ground, just some feedback that I got from a lot of my club contacts is, for example, there was a executive chef in Colorado that took a 20% pay cut and kept almost all of his staff. A GM and board of governors in Texas opted to pay all of their staff for 90 days. This is something that you really rarely saw on the hotel side, and certainly not on the restaurant side. I had another club that converted their 2020 capital expenditures into payroll so they could pay for their staff, and that was a club in Pennsylvania. A GM in Florida did a partial fee and dues rebate, which was in the minority. Not many clubs did rebates to their members. It was interesting. The general manager of California said, we became the answer line for anything from COVID to health to where to eat, who's open, who's, and they became almost like a switchboard. One of the other things that was very interesting is, through the national support of the Club Managers Association of America, there were daily email blasts, there were seminars, webinars, expert speakers on a daily basis to keep the club managers connected and through best practices. One thing that was very interesting is private clubs were excluded from the SBA loan program from HR 748, so they were not able to get federal relief like hotels and restaurants did. So something interesting. So they're very much self-supporting. And when I said earlier that that clubs, in fact, a lot of club members dug into their own pockets to keep things afloat. Something that's very unique, and it goes back to that emotional connection to their private club. On the area of club dues, as I said, that pretty much 94%, pretty much everybody remained the same. There was a few clubs that reduced or waived clubs dues. Now all dues are back into full effect, because now clubs have come back into full effect. What really is interesting, staff compensation side. When you look at more than almost 50% were either 25% more of full wages being paid. If the hotel sector, it was completely flip-flop. Only 13% were laid off or furloughed. So again, clubs really took care of their own. And I heard that time and time and time again when I was speaking with a lot of my club candidates, as compared to my hotel candidates, which 80 to 85 of them were all furloughed or laid off. Or they were kept on, but only working 1 or 2 days a week to walk through an empty hotel, just to make sure that the lights were turned off and everything was okay. On the recovery, this is the other thing that was really interesting. Once the local jurisdiction gave the okay to open, most clubs were open from 1 to 3 days, 50% of them, and 72% of them were opened within 4 days to 6 days, and almost all of them were open within 1 week. So the reaction time to get the clubs reopened was very, very, very small compared to when I'm speaking to my hotels right now. They're taking weeks to reopen. There's just a lot of work that needs to be done and a lot of hoops that need to be jumped through, more so on the hotel side than on the private club side. Okay. So what's the current state, and what are clubs doing now? Just some interesting statistics. Right now, 65% of all of the clubs that were surveyed are now taking temperatures for the staff, and 18% for the members. As far as waivers, 24% of the staff, 24% of the clubs requiring staff to sign waivers, and 50% for the members. Masks is very interesting. It's very controversial. Masks is very controversial. I'm very pro-mask, but for the current state now, 80% of private clubs surveyed were making it mandatory for staff to wear masks, and 44 for members. Because it's a members club, the rules are a little bit different, so it's not 100% mandatory. Even if your jurisdiction is mandatory, a private club is somewhat immune from that. When we compare that to hard hit, as I said, the vast majority of employees were laid off, furloughed. There was an immediate loss of business, and most importantly, there was very little safety net, unless it was a corporate safety net. Those have now are dried up. Business, the biggest effect is whether you are a group hotel or a family and individual travel, or your as we used to call them, weekend warriors. The group hotels, as I speak to candidates, especially in sales, group, especially meaningful group sizes, have pretty much dropped off throughout the end of 2020. They're still seeing a little bit of traction in Q1 of 2021, but mostly for this year, everything is completely gone. Some of the smaller hotels, the luxury hotels, the boutique hotels that rely a lot on families and individual travelers and business travelers, those are starting to bounce back a little bit faster. When you think about it, especially for those events, all of the related businesses is also, bouncing back very, very slow. This impacts transportation, not just airline, but ground transfers and ground transportation companies, all of the restaurants, all of the facilities that go along with it. So the spider web of impact on hotels and resorts is huge, especially compared to that of a private club. Okay. Again, if it's a large group-based property, the bounce back is going to be much, much slower. Some, well into 2021, even into mid to late 2021, just because it's so uncertain right now and because of airline travel right now. Again, if for small independent boutique style hotels and inns, it will certainly bounce back a lot quicker. Restaurants, unfortunately, a lot of restaurants have now just folded and closed. I think that people need to emotionally, wrap their heads around being able to go back into a hotel, into a restaurant again. And with all the restraints put onto restaurants, it's certainly not going to be the same experience as it was before going in. Some observations. Again, clubs will be some of the first to reopen and achieve business as usual. Staff for the most part has been very well looked after, and I guess, like American Express said, membership has its privileges. This is very different than post 9/11, the financial crash. It's emotionally very different. There's a fear factor that was unlike any other previous any previous situation that we've had before. I'm an executive recruiter. I can tell you, in recruiting, we're looking for a big bounce back in quarter 3, quarter 4. Although with that said, we've had a very good week last week, and we started to get a lot of inquiries in, most of them being international. And again, we're all in this together. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation. If there's any questions.